Hi, hello, and welcome or welcome back, I suppose. So like I said in my last video, this month I am trying to read more from my shelf by taking the books that I have in my tin. I don't have any books in my tin. I think it made that sound last time and I wasn't a huge fan of it. So I like doing it this way because it means I get a little surprise. Because honestly, I'm bad at choosing, and sometimes I am in the mood for a particular book, but as you saw last time, the surprise does me well sometimes, because, oh my god, that was fucking incredible. So, today, I am reading, well, not today, but today you will be seeing me reviewing Really Good, actually, by Monica Heisey. Do I have that in the right place? I don't think so. When I say in the right place, it's half. Most of my bookshelf is, like, as you would expect, laid out like that. But I also have a lot on top. Most of them I can see, but not all of them. And it looks like this is one that I can't see because it's not laid the way where I would be able to see it. So just give me a quick moment. It was on my shelf in the right place. It just happened to be behind one of the little trinkety type objects I have on there. So, didn't ask. This is the book. And this is the blurb. Maggie's marriage has ended just 608 days after it started. But she's fine. She's doing really good, actually. Sure, she's alone for the first time and can't afford her rent, and her obscure PhD is going nowhere. But at the age of 29, Maggie is determined to embrace her new status as a surprisingly young divorcee. Trademarked. As Maggie throws herself headlong into the chaos of her first year of divorce, she soon finds herself questioning everything, including, why do we still get married? Did I fail before I even got started? And how many 4 a.m. delivery burgers do I need to eat until I am happy? It seems right up my street. It seems like it will be fun, darkly fun, I think, and also tragic in a way that just makes me love it. I mean, obviously, there's no guarantee I will love it, but it just seemed right up my street. That kind of, not tragic in a dark way, but tragic in a, yeah, that sounds about right, kind of, I don't know, slice of life type way. I love a bit of slice of life, so hopefully I will love this too. You've already seen the intro, you know what we're talking about, so let's just get right on into it. But before we do talk about the book in sort of a review fashion, just know that there is a lot of chat in this book about body issues, dysmorphia, and eating disorders. I won't be delving into it too much. It all does feel very realistic, but obviously because of that, that does mean that some people may well find that this book is not something that they can read, which is fair enough, and I just think that's fair to say going in. Like I said, I will not be diving into it, but basically it's a content warning is what I'm saying. My marriage ended because I was cruel. You know me, I love a simple and effective opening line, and the rest of this first section drops you perfectly into what to expect from Maggie, our main character. It's almost rambling with, like, it was me, or it was him, or it was both of us, or it was this, or it was that, all regarding what caused the separation. And while not quite so rambly throughout the rest of the book, it is fair to say that this whole thing is done in a stream of consciousness style. And it's definitely one of those styles where it depends, well, obviously on a reader's preference, but it depends on how well an author can work with it. I'm aware that it does put a lot of people off, preferring something with like a little more structured, but I think that Heisey does a really good job with it. Honestly, it feels like the only choice star-wise for this book. Maggie is a speak first, worry about it later type of girl, and yes, often to her detriment. And given later on in the book, we get the idea, we get into the idea of journaling instead of her posting all of her thoughts online. And I just think it works so well within that. Like, free writing often is a tactic used in therapy as a sort of just get everything out there. It doesn't matter how mundane it is, that everything rises to the surface and things that maybe of use might come out. And that stream of consciousness style really reflects that. Obviously, for publication, it would be refined more than something like free writing, but you can see the links that are made. And I was hooked on her style from the start. And, you know, that's not to say that there isn't any structure to this novel. No, there aren't like distinct numbered or named chapters, but it's not like we have one long rambling passage. There are things that mean we can see obvious separation. I'd prefer some clear demarcation, but it isn't 100% necessary. Like, we get these wonderful little extras between some of the scenes / chapters, and I'm aware saying we see things like her emails and Google searches might sound, look, it might not sound like the most enticing and exciting thing. I get that. However, they're often the moments we get to see the more sort of kind of subtle insights into what's going on for her. They're not always explained or expanded upon, but they don't need it. They really speak for themselves. Some of them do play off things that we've like seen her talk about earlier, or usually quite recently, but sometimes it's just like you will see a small search and it's saying so much in probably less than 5 words. And this one is a callback to like an earlier bit that she's talking about, but one of my favourite searches in one of the lists, because this one comes up a couple of times, is normal coverage bathing suit. And sure, to an extent that means covering her chest properly, probably covering her tummy, but we all know what that really means, especially given what she's called back to earlier. Why do companies make bathing suits, bikinis, all that sort of thing? Why do they make those assuming that you are smooth like an action man? I don't think anybody is hoping for their labia to make a surprise appearance when they're trying to go for a little swim, hanging out at the beach. Like, nobody's, you know, wanting anything to pop out. Why do they make them like half an inch across, expecting that to give you full coverage? It's ridiculous. The little asides are done really well, because while there are repeating types, Heisey spaces them out enough that none of them begin to feel overused at all. The aside about Kintsugi got me good, man. Like, because you're reading it knowing full well that if one of her friends were to be going through something like that, then she would be the one waffling on about the way we aren't really broken and there's beauty in being broken while we fix ourselves. Maggie is always just out of reach of self-awareness. Throughout most of the book, she is so insistent that she doesn't need therapy or journaling or anything like that, because she's not actually been through trauma or anything. It's just a divorce. She's just going through a tough time at the minute. It's fine. She's okay. Except we're all seeing what she's doing around the justification that she's okay. Early on, she's very insistent that she is not depressed, but also she says that she's basically turning her apartment into a temple to her grief. We see her saying that she is able to not think about John, her ex, anymore. Like, she can just put him out of her mind, but we see what she's doing. She's fast-tracking a burnout by non-stop just doing stuff. She works as much as humanly possible, and when she's not working, she is taking up 50,000 hobbies just to distract herself with as little rest as she can get. And she knows she's kind of doing it as a distraction, but the self-awareness of, like, knowing that she's not really stopping thinking about him, she's not doing anything healthy, it's always just out of reach for her. Like, honestly, I would say 90% of my notes, especially like the further I went through, are just begging her to get a therapist. Don't get me wrong, Maggie is so funny and entertaining. Like, I love the humor of this book, but Jesus Christ, it is a car crash in slow motion, only getting more and more disastrous. And like, sure, sometimes she is well-meaning, but even when she's well-meaning or she's trying to do something nice for someone, like, even in the nicer moments, she's often just deeply embarrassing. Like, if you cannot deal with secondhand embarrassment, this book is definitely not for you. But as a messy bitch who does love other people's drama, I thought this book was fantastic. And like, especially in fiction, like, give me the joy of someone else's mess while being able to live in the knowledge that it isn't even real. Nobody gets hurt. Oh, that's everything to me. I spoke about this when I was talking about talking at night. Like, that feeling of being in a restaurant and overhearing a messy couple next to you. That's what this book feels like, but on like another level. Like, just on repeat in my head throughout reading this book, and it's like only getting worse as the book goes on, just going, stop it, Maggie, please, you can do better than this. Get a therapist, or at least just like consider a therapist. Could you look for a therapist? Like, I'm begging at this point. No, don't do that. This hurts me. I cannot imagine how this is for you. Like, get a therapist. Stop. And yet, weirdly, I could not stop laughing at this book. It's that feeling of laughing through pain, or laughing when you really shouldn't be. But it is really good. It's very clearly, in general, like that humor of people who use humor as a coping mechanism, which, listen, if I have to be mentally ill, at least I get to be funny. So this book definitely appeals to that part of me. Like, this book was actively painful to read at times, but I genuinely mean that as a compliment to Haney. On the one hand, I genuinely laughed out loud a few times while reading this, which is unusual, but on the other hand, I was in the fetal position thanks to cringing so hard. Because the thing is, like, Maggie isn't always a great person. Like I said, this book and her, it's all very entertaining, but she is just so deeply flawed. There comes a point where she is willfully ignorant to the person that she is, the person that she's become, because of her refusal to get help. So when she does end up in a therapist's office, it's, I mean, first of all, she is not in a therapist's office because she's decided to get a therapist for her. What this was supposed to be was like a meeting between her and her ex as a kind of settle things down after the divorce, because they can't get divorced yet. I don't know if this is a Canadian thing, because that's what the book's set. It's mostly in Toronto, or however Canadians say it differently, like Toronto or whatever. Fine. But yeah, when you've separated, when you're married, you have to wait at least a year until you can actually become legally divorced. So after separation, she's tried to book this therapy thing, and it's not for her. But as soon as she's now in a therapist's office, obviously things do start coming out, and it's basically like putting a bunch of Mentos in a bottle of Diet Coke and just bouncing it off the tarmac. That scene is probably the best in the book for a number of reasons. Firstly, because we get to see Maggie have to get off her high horse about not needing help. It's also kind of cathartic to see just everything burst out of her and just tumble out of her. I was sat reading with like eyes wide open, because like everything that we as readers have been able to see brewing under the surface is now, like I say, bursting out of her. Had she spoken to someone much sooner, it may well have been much more sedate, but it's too late for that now. This is a woman finally realising, but still wanting to refuse, that something is wrong with her. She can't hide behind anything here. She can use humour. She can hide behind the words that she's saying. She can say as much as she likes. I'm fine. If I remember rightly, during that, she literally screams, I'm fine. And she's trying to smile, but it's not meeting her eyes. Like, it's very bare. I also love her. Like, I love seeing her have to confront the fact that she is not and has never been over her relationship, which is fair, but this is something that has been hidden in plain sight, to say the least, for everybody viewing what she's been doing. And I just remember getting to the end of that scene and thinking, if she doesn't go back here, I'm going to be so cross. And it's just so much. And I think as well, I really like the way it's done, because we've always seen that John the ex doesn't respond to any of her emails, and she said that he doesn't respond to her if she's left messages or texts or anything like that. But in this scene, we find out that there's a lot she's kept hidden from us. She has just been keeping so much from us about perhaps why he hasn't been like messaging her back or anything like that. While we've always seen what like Maggie can't or probably refuses to see, like that she's not in a good state, it turns out that we actually had no idea, and there is so much more that comes out during this scene. And the thing is, it is one of those cases where things just continue to get worse and worse until we even have a glimmer of anything getting better. Like, it's one of those things where she has to have a wake-up call, and because of the point she's hit, it has to be incredibly harsh. There is a wedding scene. She's not got remarried. A friend from school, she goes to a wedding, and it is disastrous. That wedding and the aftermath, watching that whole breakdown basically was just the most cringe I felt in my body. And again, I mean that as a compliment to Haney for the work that she's done, because I viscerally felt so much of that scene. It's just, oh. But we're seeing her hit rock bottom, and for her, that was the only way for her to be able to pick herself back up, and that's true for some people. It's a weird one with this book, because when you talk about it, it's one of those where it's like, yeah, no, this is like as depressing as it is funny, but when you're reading it, it's just like I say, slow motion car crash. But unfortunately, I don't know how to explain that, like, the car crash is funny. Like, maybe because it's two clown cars or something. It's so ridiculous. Though, I will say, the wedding part, the bit in the bathroom was so funny. Funny in that way that, like, a lot of this book is, actually. It's funny in that way where it's just like, oh god, that's so sad. And not like I'm crying my eyes out kind of sad, but like a pathetic kind of sad. The thing where you just look and go, oh no. Like, this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but honestly, I feel like it's very fitting. You know those men on TikTok who, like, try to be sexy by fingering fruit? And you look at that and go, God, you're just sad, actually. It's that kind of sad. It's just, like, remarkably pathetic. Pity is actually a feeling that sort of swells around this book, to be honest. You pity her so much because you can see what she's doing to herself and there's nothing you can do about it. Especially, like, her friends have all gone, there's nothing we can do about this. That moment after the wedding where she has to confront one of her friends is just like, oh, she needed it, but like, oh. And yeah, I had such a good time, if admittedly a pained time, reading this book, and I will definitely be on the lookout for more of Heisey's work in the future. I'd be curious to see what other kinds of stories she tells, and honestly, I hope she keeps telling stories like this. The messy bitch in me craves it. I want to see messy and pathetic lead characters, and I especially want to be able to see, this sounds so silly, but I want to see messy and pathetic women just in funny stories where it's not like some tragic tale or something. I love being able to see women in fiction just being messy. This does have a real air of Bridget Jones around it, but somehow even more disastrous, which is saying something. Now, next week, I won't be pulling from my little title tin, but I am still reading from my shelf, technically. So stick around to find out what's coming up, and feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to put your notifications on, and all that cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.